Our world is a place of breathtaking wonder. Look around you. See the intricate dance of life in every corner of our planet. From the smallest insect flitting amongst the flowers to the great blue whale gliding through the depths of the ocean. Each creature, each plant, each living thing is a masterpiece of evolution. It is a story of survival, of adaptation, and of change over immense spans of time. This story connects us all. It is a shared inheritance, a grand tapestry woven with the threads of countless generations. We are but one thread in this magnificent design, a recent addition to a story that began billions of years ago, long before we ever walked this earth. This grand tapestry tells a tale of incredible transformation. It speaks of a time when our planet was barren and silent, a world without birdsong, without the rustle of leaves, without any sign of life at all. Yet, from that sterile silence, something truly remarkable emerged. A single, simple spark ignited a process. To begin our story, we must travel back in time. Not just hundreds of years or thousands, but billions. We must journey to a time when our planet Earth was young and almost unrecognizable. Imagine a world of violent, chaotic beauty, a world sculpted by fire and rock. Volcanoes, vast and numerous, constantly erupted, spewing molten lava across the surface and filling the sky with thick, dark clouds of ash and gas. There were no continents as we know them, only a turbulent landscape of cooling rock and fiery mountains. The air was thick with gases we could not breathe, a toxic cocktail of methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, utterly alien to our modern lungs. The heavens themselves were a dramatic spectacle. The young sun shone with a different intensity, and the moon, much closer to the Earth than it is today, exerted a powerful gravitational pull, creating colossal tides in the primordial oceans. The atmosphere was thin, offering little protection from the harsh radiation of space or the constant bombardment of asteroids and comets. These celestial visitors, remnants from the formation of the solar system, slammed into our planet with unimaginable force. Each impact reshaped the surface, vaporized oceans, and sent shockwaves across the globe. It was a world of endless violence, a crucible of cosmic proportions, and seemingly no place for life to begin. And yet, amidst this chaos, there was another crucial ingredient: water. As the planet slowly began to cool over millions of years, the water vapor released by volcanoes condensed and fell as rain. How does life begin? This is one of the most profound questions we can ask. How can a collection of non-living chemicals, simple molecules swirling in a primordial soup, cross the threshold into life? It is a mystery that has captivated scientists and thinkers for centuries. On the young Earth, all the necessary ingredients were present. The oceans were a rich broth of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Energy, in the form of lightning and ultraviolet radiation from the sun, pulsed through this chemical mix. These forces could have driven simple molecules to combine, forming more complex structures. It was a process of cosmic chemistry playing out on a planetary scale over an immense period of time. Slowly, patiently, over millions of years, something extraordinary began to unfold in these ancient waters. Simple inorganic molecules began to link together, forming the building blocks of life. Molecules like amino acids, the components of proteins and nucleotides, the components of DNA and RNA. We have seen this happen in laboratory experiments that simulate the conditions of early Earth. It seems that the formation of these crucial organic molecules is not a rare or difficult event, but a natural consequence of the chemistry of our universe. The ancient oceans were gradually becoming a sea of potential, a cradle filled with the very stuff of which life is made. The next step, however, is a monumental leap. How did these simple building blocks assemble themselves into the first living cell? A cell is not just a bag of chemicals, it is an incredibly complex and organized system. How did life make the jump from the simple prokaryotic cell to something vastly more complex? The answer is not one of gradual, step-by-step change, but of a sudden revolutionary partnership. It is a story of one cell engulfing another, not to destroy it, but to form a union that would change the future of life forever. This idea, known as the theory of endosymbiosis, is one of the most important concepts in modern biology. It suggests that the complex eukaryotic cell, the cell type that makes up all animals, plants, fungi, and protists, including ourselves, is actually a community of ancient microbes living together in a permanent, cooperative arrangement. The story likely began when a large ancestral prokaryotic cell, perhaps an archaeon, tried to prey upon a smaller bacterium. But instead of being digested, the smaller cell survived, taking up residence inside its host. This was no ordinary bacterium. It was a specialist in using oxygen to produce vast amounts of energy. For the host cell, living in a world where oxygen levels were beginning to rise, this was an incredible gift. The small internal resident could detoxify the poisonous oxygen and, in the process, provide its host with a huge surplus of energy. In return, the smaller cell received protection from the outside world and a steady supply of raw materials. This was a partnership that benefited both parties immensely. Over countless generations, the two independent organisms became one. The internal guest became entirely dependent on its host, eventually losing many of its own genes for independent survival. It evolved into what we now know as the mitochondrion, the powerhouse of the eukaryotic cell. For over 2 billion years, life had been a solitary affair. The world was ruled by single cells, each a self-sufficient individual, living and dying on its own. While they were incredibly successful, their size and complexity were fundamentally limited. A single cell can only grow so large before it becomes inefficient. To build something bigger, something grander, life needed to learn a new trick. It needed to learn how to cooperate. The journey towards multicellular life was not a singular event that happened once, but a leap that life has taken independently on more than 20 separate occasions. It seems that once the powerful eukaryotic cell was perfected, the draw towards cooperation was almost inevitable. The first steps on this path were likely very simple. Imagine a single-celled alga that divides to reproduce. Instead of the two new daughter cells drifting apart to lead separate lives, they remain stuck together. Perhaps a sticky protein on their outer surface caused them to cling to one another. The next time they divided, the cluster would grow from 2 cells to 4, then 8, and so on. This was not yet a true multicellular organism, it was merely a colony, a simple clump of identical cells living side by side. There was no specialization, no coordination. Each cell still performed all the essential functions of life for itself, just as its solitary ancestors had done for millennia. These simple colonies, however, may have offered subtle but crucial advantages. For billions of years, life's progress had been, well, slow and steady. The world was dominated by microbes and then by the first simple multicellular organisms. These early creatures, known as the Ediacaran biota, were strange, soft-bodied beings. They were sort of like quilted air mattresses or simple fern-like fronds, just living a quiet existence on the seafloor. They lacked heads, tails, limbs, or mouths. Honestly, they seemed to be an experiment in body design that ultimately went nowhere. Then, around 541 million years ago, something extraordinary happened. The curtain rose on a new evolutionary act, and the pace of change suddenly accelerated beyond all measure. This was the beginning of the Cambrian period. In a geological blink of an eye, the tranquil Ediacaran seafloor gave way to a world teeming with new and bizarre creatures. This event is so dramatic, so transformative, that scientists call it the Cambrian explosion. It wasn't an explosion in the sense of a bomb going off, but an explosion of diversity, of new forms, of new ways of living. Over a period of just 10 to 20 million years, almost all the major animal groups, or phyla, that we know today, made their first appearance in the fossil record. It was as if life, after billions of years of quiet preparation, had suddenly decided to unveil all of its best ideas at once. The oceans, once home to simple, passive organisms, were suddenly filled with animals that could move, hunt, and defend themselves. This was the dawn of the active animal lifestyle. For the first time, we see creatures with distinct heads and tails, with legs for walking and fins for swimming. We see the first recognizable ancestors of insects, crabs, and spiders, the arthropods. We see the first mollusks, the ancestors of snails and clams, and we see the first chordates, the group that would eventually include all vertebrates, including ourselves. It was a biological Big Bang, an unparalleled burst of evolutionary creativity. The world had never seen anything like it. For over 3 billion years, life had been an almost exclusively aquatic affair. The vast continents of Earth were barren, silent landscapes of rock, dust, and sand. They were baked by harsh, unfiltered ultraviolet radiation from the sun, a sterile and hostile world utterly devoid of life. But beneath the waves, the oceans were teeming with activity. Among the most successful inhabitants were the green algae, descendants of the great endosymbiotic partnership that had mastered photosynthesis. They thrived in the sunlit coastal waters, and it was from these humble beginnings that life would launch its most audacious invasion. The conquest of the land was about to begin, and plants would be the pioneers. The transition from water to land was one of the greatest challenges life has ever faced. A plant living in water is constantly bathed in the nutrients it needs, supported by buoyancy, and protected from drying out. The land offered none of these comforts. The first plants to venture ashore faced a series of formidable problems. How could they support themselves against the pull of gravity? How could they find and absorb water and nutrients from the dry ground? And most critically, how could they reproduce and avoid desiccating in the open air? Solving these problems required a suite of radical new evolutionary innovations. The very first land plants were likely small, simple organisms, not much more than a green film on damp rocks, closely related to modern mosses and liverworts. They had to stay close to water, living in moist, humid environments where they could absorb water directly through their surfaces. They developed a waxy outer layer, a cuticle, to help reduce water loss, like a thin waterproof coat. They also evolved tiny pores, called stomata, that they could open and close to exchange gases with the atmosphere without losing too much precious water. These were the first, tentative steps in adapting to a life exposed to the elements, a fragile foothold in a new world. The reign of the amphibians, tied as they were to the water's edge, could not last forever. As the climate of the world began to change, becoming drier and more seasonal, their swampy habitats started to shrink. A new group of vertebrates was poised to take advantage of this changing world. They were the reptiles. These animals possessed a revolutionary adaptation that would allow them to break their final link with the water and conquer the dry interiors of the continents. This great innovation was the amniotic egg. It was a private pond, a self-contained life support system that could be laid on land without drying out. The amniotic egg was a masterpiece of biological engineering. With this newfound freedom, the reptiles began to diversify with astonishing speed, spreading across the supercontinent of Pangaea. They evolved scaly, waterproof skin to further reduce their reliance on moisture. Their lungs and circulatory systems became more efficient, better suited for an active life on land. In the Permian period, which followed the Carboniferous, they became the dominant land animals. But this first age of reptiles came to a cataclysmic end. Around 252 million years ago, the planet suffered the most severe extinction event in its history, the Permian-Triassic extinction, often called the Great Dying. Massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia poisoned the atmosphere and oceans, wiping out an estimated 95% of all marine species and 70% of land species. The world was left a desolate, empty stage, but life, as always, is resilient. In the aftermath of this devastation, a new group of reptiles, the archosaurs, would rise from the ashes. From this group, two new dynasties would emerge, the crocodiles and the incredible dinosaurs. While the dinosaurs dominated the Mesozoic world in spectacular fashion, another very different story was quietly unfolding in the shadows. A new group of animals had evolved, descendants of those same sail-backed synapsids from the Permian. These were the first mammals. Throughout the entire age of dinosaurs, our own distant ancestors were small, nocturnal creatures. They were no bigger than a mouse or a shrew, living their lives in the undergrowth, in burrows, and in the branches of the great Mesozoic forests. The long reign of the dinosaurs came to a sudden and catastrophic end. 66 million years ago, the world changed forever. An asteroid estimated to be at least 10 kilometers wide was hurtling through space on a collision course with Earth. It struck our planet in the shallow seas of what is now the Gulf of Mexico, hitting with the force of billions of atomic bombs. The impact vaporized everything at ground zero and sent a colossal shockwave and heat wave racing across the globe. It triggered gargantuan tsunamis that washed hundreds of miles inland and caused earthquakes that shook the entire planet to its core. The immediate devastation, however, was only the beginning of the horror. The impact threw trillions of tons of pulverized rock, dust, and soot high into the atmosphere, enshrouding the entire planet in a thick blanket of darkness. This impact winter plunged the world into a deep, freezing twilight that may have lasted for years. Sunlight could no longer reach the surface, causing temperatures to plummet and killing off the plants that formed the base of every food chain. First the herbivores starved, and then the carnivores that fed upon them followed. The intricate ecological web that had sustained the dinosaurs for millennia completely unraveled. The dinosaurs, with their huge bodies and massive appetites, were particularly vulnerable. They had nowhere to hide and nothing to eat. Their long and glorious reign ended not with a whimper, but with a global cataclysm of fire and ice. The great marine reptiles and the flying pterosaurs also vanished forever. It was one of the most devastating extinction events in our planet's history, wiping out roughly 75% of all species. The world fell silent once more. The thunderous footsteps of the giants were gone, leaving a void, an empty world filled with opportunity for any creature that had managed to survive the apocalypse. And who were the survivors? Small creatures weighing less than 25 kilograms had the best chance. Animals that could burrow underground to escape the initial heat blast and the subsequent cold stood a chance. Around 2.5 million years ago, a new kind of hominin appeared on the African stage. It had a larger brain and a smaller face than its Australopithecine ancestors. This was the dawn of our own genus, the beginning of the line of Homo. The earliest member of this group is known as Homo habilis, or handyman. The name is significant because found alongside the fossils of Homo habilis are the very first stone tools. These were not just conveniently shaped rocks, but stones that had been deliberately modified, intentionally flaked, to create sharp cutting edges. This was a profound cognitive leap. It was, honestly, the birth of technology. These simple tools, known as Oldowan choppers, revolutionized the lives of these early humans. A sharp stone flake could do what teeth and fingernails could not. It could butcher a carcass, slice through tough animal hides, and crack open bones to get at the nutritious marrow inside. This gave them access to a rich new source of calories and protein, which in turn may have fueled the expansion of their energy-hungry brains. The relationship between tool use, diet, and brain growth became a powerful feedback loop. Better tools led to better food, which supported bigger brains, which could then invent even better tools. This cycle would drive human evolution for the next 2 million years. About 2 million years ago, a new and remarkably successful human species emerged, Homo erectus, the upright man. This was a hominin of a completely different caliber. They were taller, with body proportions much more like our own, and they were built for long-distance walking and running. Their brains were significantly larger than those of Homo habilis, and their toolkits were more sophisticated. But their most significant achievement was their wanderlust. Homo erectus was the first human species to leave Africa, spreading out across Asia and Europe. This was the first great wave of human migration, a testament to their incredible adaptability. Homo erectus also harnessed one of the most powerful forces of nature, fire. The controlled use of fire was a transformative technology. It provided warmth, allowing our ancestors to survive in colder climates. It offered protection, keeping dangerous predators at bay during the night. Our story now arrives at its most recent, and perhaps most dramatic, chapter. Following millions of years of evolution across the African continent, a new species emerged. They were anatomically identical to us, with high, vaulted skulls to house a large and complex brain, a flat face tucked beneath the cranium, and a prominent chin. This was Homo sapiens, the wise human. We appeared in Africa around 300,000 years ago, arising from the ancestral populations of Homo erectus and other archaic humans. For a time we were not alone. We shared the planet with other human species like the robust Neanderthals in Europe and the mysterious Denisovans in Asia. The world was a mosaic of different human forms, each adapted to their own environment. What set Homo sapiens apart? It was not greater strength or a particular physical advantage. Our true advantage lay within our minds. Our brains, particularly the large frontal lobes, gave us an unprecedented capacity for abstract thought, for complex planning, and for symbolic communication. We developed language not just as a system of warning calls, but as a rich and flexible tool for sharing complex ideas. We could speak of the past and the future, of things that were not physically present, of stories, myths, and laws. This ability to create and share a collective reality allowed for a level of cooperation and social organization never before seen on Earth. We could unite hundreds, even thousands of individuals around a common belief or goal. Armed with this new cognitive power, Homo sapiens began to spread out of Africa in a series of migrations starting around 100,000 years ago. This time, the expansion was different from that of Homo erectus. We were equipped with a more sophisticated toolkit, including finely crafted blades, needles for sewing tailored clothing, and projectile weapons like spears, and eventually the bow and arrow. This technology allowed us to adapt to almost any environment on the planet, from the frozen tundra of the Ice Age to the dense tropical rainforests. We were not just physically adaptable, we were culturally adaptable. We carried our environment with us, in our tools, our clothing, and our shared knowledge. As we spread across the globe, we encountered the other human species that had made these lands their homes for millennia. The details of these encounters are still being pieced together through genetics and archaeology, but the outcome is clear. Within a few tens of thousands of years of our arrival, the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and all other archaic human forms had vanished. Whether they were outcompeted for resources, absorbed into our populations, or actively eliminated is a matter of intense debate. What is certain is that by about 40,000 years ago, for the first time in millions of years, there was only one species of human left on planet Earth. Our species stood alone. We have traveled an immense distance together. Our journey has taken us across 4 billion years of Earth's history. We began on a young, violent planet of fire and water, a world without life. We witnessed the miraculous spark of creation in the primordial soup, as simple chemicals linked together to form the first self-replicating molecules. We saw these pioneers wrap themselves in protective membranes, becoming the first cells. These humble microscopic beings, the prokaryotes, reigned supreme for half of Earth's existence, quietly and profoundly transforming the world around them, inventing the very chemistry of life that we still use today. Every breath we take is an echo of their ancient innovations. We then saw life take a great leap in complexity through a remarkable act of partnership. One cell engulfed another, not to consume it but to form a union that would change everything. This led to the eukaryotic cell, a powerhouse of controlled energy and organized structure. This new type of cell, with its nucleus and mitochondria, became the building block for all large life. We watched as these cells learned to cling together, to communicate, to specialize, forming the first multicellular organisms. This innovation opened the door to size and scale, allowing life to build the first bodies, to move with purpose, and to perceive the world in new ways, setting the stage for the animal kingdom. Our journey took us to the Cambrian seas, where we saw an explosion of new forms. Life, it seemed, was experimenting with every imaginable body plan in a burst of creative energy. This was the dawn of the predator and the prey, an evolutionary arms race that drove the development of shells, spines, eyes, and legs. From these teeming waters, life embarked on its next great conquest, the land. We saw plants green the barren continents, followed first by the armored arthropods and then by our own vertebrate ancestors, as they bravely transitioned from fin to limb, from water to air. Subscribe to discover more mysteries of life and the universe.